Welcome to this very special episode of Church and State. My name is Stephen Kokx, and it is my great honor today to be joined by His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn, the Superior General of the Roman Catholic Institute. Bishop Sanborn was ordained a priest by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre on June 29, 1975 in Econ, and later consecrated by Bishop Robert McKenna on June 19, 2002. His Excellency is rector of the Most Holy Trinity Seminary in Reading, Pennsylvania, where he joins us today. Your Excellency, thank you for being on Church and State.
Thank you for having me.
It's a great privilege, like I said, for you to be here today. I am very excited about our conversation. I know a lot of people are looking forward to it. But before getting into the topic of Sedevacantism, the crisis in the Church, the state of tradition, I do want to say your show with Stephen Heiner has been a very enlightening and very informative show that I watch, as well as many others. You're now over 11,000 subscribers on that. So congratulations on that. And thank you, first of all, for doing that.
It's all Stephen Heiner's work. Yes, I just work here.
Well, I know one show went almost 3 hours, Your Excellency. I promise to not go that long today. But thank you for indulging and coming on. Why did you actually agree to join or to do that podcast? I know it launched in 2023. There's not too many bishops these days who have their own show addressing all the topics which you do. What was the genesis of doing that?
I guess to get the word out. I mean, how to make use of the internet, which is obviously relatively new, at least in my lifetime. It used to be that you would send out mailings to people on lists, as what we did in the 1970s, and you might get a 2% return, and that was very good. I mean, the internet is so easy, and it gets to everybody, and people can look at it whenever they want. So really, it's just to make use of that. It's to follow the document of Vatican II on modern communications.
I'm sure, yes. Well, I'm one question I've been trying to get through on the live streams. I know I haven't put in a super chat, but I'll ask it now that I have you here. What I'm curious would be, if you were ever elected Pope, would be your papal name. Are there any figures in church history that you look to, and whose name would you take?
Well, there's plenty of figures in church history. Obviously, the name Pius evokes St. Pius X and St. Pius V. So it also evokes Pius XII, which was the last pope in which we had a normal ecclesiastical situation, I would say. So, I mean, that would be certainly a high on the list. But there are other great popes. Innocent III was a great pope, and various others, Gregory VII, etc. But it's not something I give a lot of thought to. Actually, I think my chances of being elected the Pope are rather slim.
Not ever Francis II?
No.
Well, again, thank you for being here. I did want to bring up one last thing here before we get on to the topic. You did have a question that did go a little viral for some controversy, which I'm sure you've never caused before in your life. It was about our Lord laughing, and you said he smiled, but he never laughed. And you cited what seemed to me very reasonable theologians on the matter, but a lot of people on social media, mostly non-trads, non-sedes, were a bit taken aback by that. Can you maybe expound upon that further? And actually, what is a Catholic theology of comedy? I know the church in history, especially St. Benedict, he advised his monks to not laugh and to not be very jocular. What is the real teachings of the church on that matter?
First of all, we're dealing in a theological opinion. There is no magisterium on whether he left or not. Okay. So it's a theological opinion. Don't forget that our blessed Lord, even in his human intellect, constantly had the beatific vision. So he was constantly looking at God in his human nature. You see, so the idea of associating absurd things, so there's contradictory things, and I gave the example of some pie in the face, where somebody's dignity is immediately destroyed by the pie in the face. Those are two concepts that are opposite, and so you laugh. You see, it's a funny thing. And so that's the source of humor. that would make you laugh. And the idea is, or the theory is, that our Blessed Lord was unable to do that because of his beatific vision. In other words, there was something that would be alien to him to associate absurd concepts. But that's only a theory. I mean, people should not get worked up about that. It could be completely false. I even forget why it came up.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. I think it's a topic people were over exaggerating about, perhaps. And it's like someone when they say, well, oh, I can't imagine heaven without my pet. Like, it's just something they feel emotionally attached about, and they just have to express that view when, well, there aren't pets in heaven, right? I mean, it's just the way it is.
Well, some say there are. St. Thomas says no, but some say that there'll be animals, in after the resurrection of the dead. All of those things are very speculative. So it's not really worth getting too worked up about it.
Well, like I said, you are doing your show there with Stephen Heiner, who's a layman as well as I am. My first question really is, what is the role of laity in the church today? Fulton Sheen allegedly once said, laity will save the church. Pretty bold statement. I don't know. What is our role really in these times, especially that you can see for laypersons?
Well, I would say that ordinarily the laity merely follow the clergy, and that the responsibility of maintaining the faith and distributing sacraments and saying mass, etc., is the role of the clergy. And really the laity don't have a lot to do in that sense. They can help the clergy. But unfortunately, it seems like the laity are, to a great extent, bearing the torch of the faith. And the clergy have abandoned it practically universally. I'd say practically. I mean, there's some that do very well in maintaining it, but they're in a very small minority. The clergy have defected overall from the faith, and there's a good deal of lay people that are aware of that and are retaining the faith. So I think that that's to their credit.
Do you find, though, it's more difficult because of that sort of inversion? I'm finding many on social media, trads who are in the space, influencers, Trad Inc. There's a lot of battles going on right now about what to do in response to Leo, but also the laity seem to not be trusting other people, maybe are very skeptical of newcomers, especially to this discussion of Sedevacantism. Do you find that there's because of the nature of the crisis and that there's so much more lay-driven influence on things, that it's more open to, let's say, maybe food fights, and there's a lot less charity being practiced? Are you seeing any of that? I know you probably don't spend a lot of time on social media, but is this perhaps a result of the crisis as well?
Yes, well, you have to understand that lay people, through no fault of their own, are not trained in sacred theology or philosophy. So there's a lot of things that they don't know, and they assume certain things, they don't understand certain things, and so they make mistakes. And many times they go by instinct, and I'm not criticizing them for that, because a lay person is not meant to be a theologian or to be well versed in theology. And so, yes, you have you strike the shepherd, and the sheep disperse. We don't have a shepherd. We have somebody that is a wolf, I would say, dressed up in shepherd's clothing. And the sheep are very divided as to what to do with regard to him, and which is perfectly normal. That's why we have the authority of the Catholic Church, so that lay people don't have to have this burden upon them to decide what's true, what's false, what to do, what not to do, etc. So I don't blame them. And yes, I mean, we have to have deep discussions, but at the same time, I think everyone that is interested in preserving the faith is of sterling intention. And even if they should err in one thing or the other, I think their intentions are fine. See, so in that sense, there should be a charity. That is, if there's something to disagree with, we do so in a charitable manner.
One person, well, one lay person that you yourself have done these sorts of videos with in the past is Julius Smetona. This was a clip from What Catholics Believe. I believe you might have even seen my interview with Julius several weeks ago. This is from a show which you are on in just a moment. We'll see you come up on the screen there. Do you have any memories yourself?
I think that person passed away. I don't recognize. That was 35 years ago.
Do you have any other memories of that program and any memorable moments from your time on that show?
I was thinking about that. No, Julius was a very good interviewer, and we talked about all of the topics of the time. But no, I don't have any distinct memories of things that were said or things that happened. No, it was very good, and that was successful for its time. Again, we didn't have the internet at that time. It was just broadcast on some network, but we did receive a lot of positive feedback on that.
Yeah. Well, I know myself, when I first started to really study the crisis in the church in the early 2010s, as well as many people who go to the chapel I go to now, they've seen these old YouTube clips, and you were on there. And I think one of the favorite ones that I always had was when you were debating, was it Professor Festigi at the Sacred Heart Seminary?
Well, actually, that was in our gym.
Okay.
I think he still is a professor at Sacred Heart. But that was in our gym, and we had that discussion, let's say. Debate, yes.
I would call it a body slam more than a discussion. But it was very, very memorable moment in American traditional Catholic history. So thank you for being part of
that. I mean, I thought, yes. I mean, my own impression was that I thought I defeated him, but people said that one person said I creamed him. But when I got off the boat was when he said that I said, give us an example of an ecumenical act before Vatican II. And he said, well, the three kings going to our blessed Lord. That was great. And I shut it down at that point. That was it. And actually, one of his students came to me later and said, would you like to have another debate? And I said, not after that. I mean, I can't deal with that. I mean, this is not a serious thing. And you see, so I refuse to have another debate with him.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also a matter of pearls before swine, right? That's something that we shouldn't be ultimately wasting our time on when there's other souls who might be more interested in the truth as opposed to just trying to score points on a theological matter, it seems like.
Yes.
Well, I know there's a lot of traditionalists, again, who are interested in this show and hearing from you on an array of topics. I want to get into more of the theological side of issues such as recognize and resist, Sedevacantism, as well as the thesis to which you particularly and your community hold to. I first want to just generally ask, though, why is this an important topic for Catholics to be discussing in the first place? I will find, or at least in response to a recent podcast I had with three other men, that reaction was mostly favorable because I think they enjoyed the conversation. It's very rare, Your Excellency, to have these sorts of open discussions on this topic amongst different types of Catholics, if you will. And one response was, well, this seems like such a niche topic, a first world issue. We need to focus on just getting people back to Mass. In the first place, the Latin Mass is what's important. Dividing ourselves over the issue of if this guy's the Pope or not, etc., seems to be really trying to split hairs. So I guess my first question is, why is this an important topic, and why is it worth spending a lot of time on to find the truth of?
Well, because what is supreme in the Catholic Church is the faith. All right. So the true doctrine. So that is supreme. That is even over and above the Pope. He is subject to the defined faith of the Catholic Church. It is, in a way, the constitution of the Catholic Church, the faith. So before anything else, the Mass, sacraments, pastoral considerations, the faith is everything. And the Pope also is everything in the sense that he is the vicar of Christ on earth. He has the authority of Christ to teach, rule, and sanctify the Church. And therefore, the question of the Pope is of absolute importance. It is defined that in order to attain your salvation, you must be subject to the Pope. That's Boniface VIII. That's a defined doctrine. So who is the Pope is extremely important to our salvation. It's necessary for our salvation. So we can't just figure, well, who knows, and throw our hands up and we'll put our heads in the sand and just go to mass and be happy. That is not Catholic. The identity of the Pope is central to Catholicism, and his adherence to the faith and his promulgation of the faith is central to Catholicism before any other consideration.
One question that I'm often asked as well: why does it matter, Stephen? In the Middle Ages, these serfs did not even know who the Pope was. Sometimes didn't even know his name. What do you say to the response to a question like that?
Well, they were implicitly subject to him. I mean, they went to mass. They were subject to the local hierarchy, the local priest who said mass for them. It was all one big network, you might say. So they were not opposed to him, or they were, if they didn't know his name, that they still knew that there was a Pope and that they would be subject to him. And we're not there. We don't know what they knew or did not know. I think that's a bit of an assumption.
So what is the proper, I mean, I'm obviously a layman, you're a bishop. What is the general attitude or approach Catholics should have towards the papacy itself? Because in these times you hear a lot of terms like papal minimalism or recognize and resist. And that to me really seems to make a mess, or to diminish the papacy itself, to just simply say, well, whoever's in this office can err and all these sorts of things. But what is the actual teaching, the traditional teaching on how we should approach or receive the Pope?
The traditional teaching is that you have to obey the Pope not only in what he accept with faith what he teaches, but also in discipline. As a matter of fact, Pope Pius IX condemned recognize and resist. And I'll give you the quotes, all right, if you bear with me for a second. In his apostolic letter, Non Sine Gravissimo, of February 24th, 1870, he said this to the apostolic delegate in Constantinople: all those who glory in the title of Catholic must not only be united to him in matters of faith and dogmatic truth, but also be submissive to him in matters of liturgy and discipline. He also said in his encyclical Quae in Patriarchatu, September 1st, 1876, to the clergy and faithful of the Chaldean Rite, these words: in fact, venerable brothers and beloved sons, it is a question of recognizing the power of this see, even over your churches, not merely in what pertains to faith, but also in what concerns discipline. He who would deny this is a heretic. He who recognizes this and obstinately refuses to obey is worthy of anathema. And in his encyclical Quartus Supra of January 6, 1873, to the Armenians, he said, for the Catholic Church has always considered schismatic all those who obstinately resist the authority of her legitimate prelates. So an obstinate resistance, that is a continuous resistance, an organized resistance, is schismatic. The Pope has a solemn right to the obedience of the faithful, and we have a solemn obligation to obey him in all things. He is protected by the assistance of the Holy Ghost, at least not to prescribe anything that is contrary to faith or morals, anything that would be impious or something that would have to be resisted. So and if you don't believe in the assistance of the Holy Ghost to the Catholic Church and that protection that it gives them, then you are a heretic, and also you destroy the very essence of the Catholic Church. St. Thomas Aquinas said, when we say, I believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, we are implicitly saying, I believe in the Holy Ghost assisting the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. That is the object of our faith. So we don't have to sift the Pope. We don't have to, in some way, question what he says. That's the purpose of the Catholic Church, that we don't have to question these things. Otherwise, what good is it? Why does it differ from the Anglican Church or some other church?
What then are the limits as to how far a pope in his decrees, encyclical letters, doctrinal notes, the various bulls that they've written, how far can they go until they are protected? In other words, there's a term I've heard in recent years called infallibly safe, that the pope cannot err and bind the church on matters of faith and morals, but he could be imprudent, or he could have a potentially historical fact wrong or something. What are the limits there, Your Excellency, when it comes to how protected the papacy is from any error? Is he just an oracle? That's what people will say oftentimes in these times.
No, he's not an oracle in that sense. But no, he is not protected from imprudence. And if you look at the history of the church, there has been plenty of imprudent decisions by popes. He is not protected from errors of historical fact. All right. But he is, it's something that is described as negative infallibility, and that is he cannot prescribe something that is to the church that is impious or which would be sinful to accept or contrary to previous doctrine. Mm-hmm. Those things he cannot. He is protected in that way. So, but he is not protected in other purely human aspects.
So one response I've seen to the recent doctrinal notes, that's how it was described by Fernandez. That's the note on the Co-Redemptrix blasphemy attack on Mary. A lot of influencers said, well, it's not ex cathedra, and that this is really just an unwise decision recommending against the use of that term. Is that actually the case, that just because it's not ex cathedra, it's possible to include all these sorts of errors and bad advice and that nature?
Well, this is a typical error of lay people, and that is that you only have to really believe what is solemnly defined. There are very few things solemnly defined by the Catholic Church. Most of its magisterium comes through universal ordinary magisterium. Nearly all of the moral teaching of the Catholic Church is by universal ordinary magisterium. Pope Pius XI said, it happens every single day. The church teaches universally every single day. And so those things are the object of faith. If they are derived from revelation, if revelation contains them either explicitly or implicitly, and the church proposes them as something binding. Those are just as binding as what is typically called ex cathedra. All right. So that's a fallacy that people labor under. So there's no solemn definition that cold-blooded murder is evil. There's none. All right. It's the constant teaching of the church and the universal teaching of the church. So that's something to set aside. So at least that, you see. So we're looking at now with Co-Redemptrix. I looked it up. I don't see that it was universal ordinary magisterium. I see it as a common teaching of theologians, which is strong. But I would say it's a certain theological conclusion. But I could stand corrected on that unless somebody shows me an act of magisterium on that, or universal ordinary magisterium. I don't think so. Now, mediatrix, however, does pertain to universal ordinary magisterium and is a dogma. Because Benedict XV promulgated universally to the church the liturgical feast on May 31st of Mediatrix of All Graces, and that is a sign of universal ordinary magisterium. In other words, the universal church could not have a devotion to something that is false. So that would be contrary to its indefectibility.
Well, it seems to me, Your Excellency, that the notion that the term authentic magisterium, I think this was used after Vatican II, especially by Michael Davies and the SSPX, who said, well, in the churches, in the Pope's encyclicals, there are authentic magisterium, and that there can be errors in that. Is that really where this idea, like where the Pope can err and all these sorts of things came from, or was that ever before the council?
Authentic magisterium is found typically in encyclicals and in other, you might say, more informal, or that's not maybe a good word, but less solemn documents of popes, where they might comment on something. If they don't intend to bind, if they don't intend to teach, yes, strictly speaking, they're subject to error. But I would defy somebody to find in that authentic magisterium error. If you look at all of the encyclicals of popes, I would defy somebody to find an error.
Error on faith and morals, or imprudence and a lesser matter?
Morals, I mean, yeah, if he's teaching faith and morals, then that is object of faith. But if he's teaching something like, it's a good idea that, that governments do this or that or the other thing, or something that where he does not intend to bind, but he's merely advising, let's say, yes, he could be subject to error. But even to those things, to the authentic magisterium, we owe something called religious assent. And Pius the Ninth also said that we have to. He's the supreme teacher of the church, and we give him the respect of religious assent.
So my next question will be about when can we actually resist a pope? And I want to bring up these quotes here. These are two very popular ones. I'm sure you're familiar with them. One is from St. Thomas Aquinas. The other is from St. Robert Bellarmine. And I'll just start with the Thomas Aquinas one. If the faith were endangered, a subject ought to rebuke his prelate even publicly. Hence, Paul rebuked Peter. And then secondly, St. Robert Bellarmine, it is lawful to resist a pontiff invading a body. It is lawful to resist him, and much more if he should endeavor to destroy the church. How should we understand those quotations?
Well, first, the St. Thomas was could you show me again?
Certainly.
The St. Thomas quote.
If the faith were endangered, a subject ought to rebuke his prelate, and he gives the example of Paul, who was Peter's subject, rebuked him publicly.
Yes. St. Paul was rebuking him publicly because he was giving bad example, not because St. Peter was giving bad example by spurning the Greeks, so that is, the Gentiles, and eating only with the Jews, even after it was determined that the Gentiles did not have to obey the Mosaic law. And so St. Paul was saying, you're giving scandal. See, so it's not a question of St. Peter defecting from the faith. As far as St. Robert Bellarmine destroying souls, never to destroy the church, that could be, it is lawful to resist him by not doing what he commands, St. Robert says, and by blocking him lest he should carry out his will. Still, it is not lawful to judge or punish or even depose him because he is nothing other than a superior. For example, there was a case in the Middle Ages where I forget which pope it was, but who was imposing something on a religious order contrary to the rules. And they resisted him, and he backed down. That is a specific case of a specific disciplinary matter. And yes, they could be resisted on that. But or if the Pope told you to go rob a bank for him or something like that, you could resist him. Or if he decided to shut down all of the dioceses in a country or something like that, or take away all the bishops,
open your borders.
That would be something in which he could be resisted. But the question here is he imposing doctrines which are contrary to revealed and taught doctrines, in other words, revealed by God and taught by the Catholic Church? That is a whole different thing. And no theologian ever thought it possible that could happen, that God would protect the church from such a thing happening. So really, the case doesn't have any precedent.
So the difference is that now they are using the office to impose doctrinal errors on faith and morals, whereas previously past anti-popes, you can correct me if I'm wrong, never rose to that level. Maybe they were private dissidents or private heretics, etc., but they never tried to impose it upon the faithful. Is that the difference here between?
Well, the only time that we had heresy, a private heresy of any kind of heresy, was John the 22nd. Where he said that the souls of the just do not see God until after the resurrection from the dead. And he was cited for heresy by the University of Paris for that, and he backed down. But that was simply a private opinion that he had. It was a private. He was not teaching that. You see, that's the key. Is he teaching this?
Mm-hmm.
You see, we do have a very good text from St. Paul. If I, apostle, apostolic authority, if I or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel different from what I have preached to you, let him be anathema.
Mm-hmm.
Very clear. See, so that says that the faithful must compare what is being taught to them to what has been taught to them.
Mm-hmm.
See, and if even St. Paul, if he lost the faith, for example, or an angel from heaven came down and let him be anathema, that is extremely strong. Anathema means, it's the highest of all of the censures.
Your Excellency, during the Arian crisis, what was the situation with the Pope at that time? Did he fall into similar heresies, or was that different than
No,
what
yeah,
we're seeing today?
Liberius. No, it was the Council of Rimini, and he supposedly assented to something in the Council of Rimini. The it's disputed by historians what he did. In any case, the church never considered him to have defected from the faith, and he is accepted as there's really no evidence for saying that he did defect. He was never considered to be a non-Catholic. Interesting, though, the Roman people would not accept a pope that was elected, not because he was a heretic, but because he was in communion with the Arians. He himself was not an Arian, but he was in communion with them, and they refused him. That's in the church history. That's interesting.
Yeah. How was he in communion necessarily?
Well, that he didn't break communion. In other words, see, that means he did not declare them outside of the church. That he recognized them as legitimate bishops and legitimate clergy, etc. And they refused him for that. That's how sensitive they were to. But the case of Liberius, Catholic historians would say no, he never actually defected.
Okay. I'd like to move into the topic of Sedevacantism now, Your Excellency. A lot of people who I talk to say it's above my pay grade. I can't be someone who declares that. I'm just a simple layperson. What do you say to those arguments?
Well, St. Paul didn't say this is above your pay grade. If I or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel different from what I have preached to you, let him be anathema. As the faith is supreme, and even the Pope is subject to the faith. If he defects from the faith, and far worse, teaches against the faith and imposes upon us things that are contrary to faith, you don't need to have a degree in sacred theology in order to say this is wrong. You simply have to know your catechism to say this is wrong. And so I don't think that the objection applies, because you have to, just as you compare everything to the first principles of reason. If I say to you, I can make a square circle, you say, well, that's absurd, because that's impossible to make a square circle, because it's against the first principles of reason. So also we have first principles of faith. If I say to you, Christ is not God, you're going to react to that and say that's heresy. See, because we have these principles in our mind of true faith, and they are actually more certain than the first principles of reason. So you don't need a doctorate in theology to figure this out.
I think they're perhaps scared by the idea that they sometimes maybe hear online that, well, the church historically has said, as St. Robert Bellarmine has said, it's a matter of deposing or officially recognizing that this man is not the Pope. And so I think lay people especially will say, well, look, we don't have a council to judge him. No one's above the Pope anyway. I know there's different theories on how to either recognize a heretic who's in the office or to depose a Pope. Can you expound on maybe some of those to kind of mollify some of those other concerns?
The idea of the personal sin of heresy of a Pope is barking up the wrong tree. All right. We are not concerned about that. If he were actually, let's say, just a hypothetical case, if a Pope were a heretic, personally, and he just said heretical things or wrote heretical things in a book, that would not affect me directly. I could still go to Mass. The priest would be preaching the true faith. Everything would be normal in the Catholic Church. We'd say, well, he's a heretic. That's up to the cardinals to figure that out. It's not my job. That's above my pay grade. See?
Mm.
But he is teaching this. These Vatican II so-called popes are teaching this stuff and imposing this stuff upon us. And we have to, we're meant to accept these things. And our whole faith has been ruined by these so-called popes. That is a whole different thing. So the question is the Vatican II, what has come out of Vatican II, I call it its effluent, Vatican II and its effluent, is that continuity with the past or not? That's the central question. If it is continuity with the past, then we are all wrong. We should just close down. So if it is not continuity with the past, then they are all wrong. There is no gray matter there. There's nothing in between. It either is continuity or it is not. So the question is not whether they are heretics or not, and how do you deal with a heretical pope? That is not the question. Is he teaching heresy? Is he imposing heresy? Is he imposing evil disciplines, etc.? I just saw the other day on the internet, on YouTube, a Protestant minister saying the Church of Rome approves of sodomy. And I thought, there is no response to that. I mean, what a scandal that a Protestant minister should be able to say to his people, look, the Church of Rome is all washed up. Here's proof positive that it's false. If we recognize that man as the Pope, that Protestant minister is right. See?
Yeah.
And that's what the key issue is. As I said, it's barking up the wrong tree to say, well, I think he's a heretic, or I think he means well, but he says heretical things. You could go on and on about that, and it really doesn't concern us. And we cannot depose somebody for heresy. Even the College of Cardinals can only come together and notice that he's a heretic and move to a new conclave. That's the general opinion. But all of that is really opinion. What is not opinion is that there must be absolute continuity in the Catholic Church.
Again, thank you everybody for tuning in today. Just be sure if you're watching, this is not a live stream, so if you're asking questions in the comment box, we won't be able to get to them. This is not a typical Q&A that His Excellency does usually with Stephen Heiner, but we thank him for coming on and you all being here and watching. Your Excellency, to that point, I think there's a lot of trads who are not convinced or not at the steady position just yet, but who do see a lot of the heresies coming out, which is why they're resisting in the first place and trying to denounce what they're seeing. But then they will say, well, I can't become a sede because that means the gates of hell have prevailed against the church. Obviously, Christ promised that would not happen. What is wrong with that argument? It's very, very common. I see it all the time. What are the gates of hell, and where is because it deals with indefectibility of the church, I believe.
Well, the precise reason for Sedevacantism is to protect indefectibility. These people who are elected popes are not unable to sin. They are not unable to fall into heresy. They they can become heretics. If they are teaching this heresy, it is a certain sign that they are not popes because they lack the assistance of the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost, because of indefectibility and infallibility of the church, cannot permit that. So we are obliged to say it is not only they are not popes, it is impossible that they be popes, because it is impossible that the church teach error to its people. So it actually preserves the indefectibility of the church. Otherwise, how do you defend indefectibility when these people are? Look at what's happened to all of these so-called popes since Vatican II.
Is that, Your Excellency, what the gates of hell prevailing means? What is the actual theological definition of that term itself?
Well, I mean, that's up to scripture scholars, but it means the destruction of the church, which would be primarily the destruction of its doctrine. The doctrine is primary in the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And everything about the Catholic Church is based on its doctrine. So if the doctrine is faulty, then the church has defected.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to preserve the indefectibility, we say these people not only are not popes, but they cannot be popes.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's, I'm not sure if you agree with the term practical Sedevacantists, because it seems to me that a lot of recognize and resist SSPXers, SSPX resistance, etc., they don't follow the traditional teaching towards the Pope, which seems to me to be that he is the proximate rule of the faith. Every day they say, well, I submit to him, or he is my Pope, but then every hour they go on and tell us where he's wrong. Is that the traditional, again, teaching on the church, where we treat him as the proximate norm of the faith? And what do you say about the term? They're basically all practical Sedevacantists. They just don't really know it yet.
Yeah, I consider them practical Sedevacantists. They act as if he doesn't exist. I mean, what is the difference between ourselves and them? I mean, they act as if he doesn't exist. They give lip service. As a matter of fact, Pius IX, in one of those quotes that I gave you, said, what good does it do to give me lip service that you are subject to me when in fact you're resisting me? That's in one of those documents. You can look it up in the Denzinger. Yes, I consider them practical Sedevacantists. I mean, when actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a disrespect even to someone that you would consider the Roman Pontiff to say, well, you're the Roman Pontiff, but we do whatever we please. And we just act and do what we want.
So then this gets into the idea of universal acceptance, right? This is, again, another common argument that you'll hear, that, well, the cardinals accept him. They put him in the canon at Mass. Even the SSPX does this. And the lay people say he's our Pope. Doesn't that sanitize the problems? And the fact that they say he's the Pope, he's universally accepted, so therefore he is the Pope?
No, universal pacific acceptance, we call that UPA, is only good with regard to election. See, if there is some sort of conflict or problem in the election, if the Roman crowd was saying, we want you to elect so and so, and there was pressure felt or something like that, universal pacific acceptance would sanitize that. See, and say, okay, the election is fine. It cannot make a pope someone who is defying the Catholic faith and teaching his defiance of the Catholic faith to the church. It has nothing to do. The authority comes from Christ. The election comes from the church. So his acceptance would sanitize or cure the problem of election. And we are saying he is validly elected. That's the thesis, that he is validly elected. And so we're not arguing about that. And yes, that would be an argument that he is commonly accepted by those who profess to be Catholics.
Yeah, my response has always been, well, he's at least recognized by the modernists. Modernists will recognize modernists, but for 60 some years, the traditionalists, the real Catholics, have been resisting him. So there's the sense of the faith there, saying, no, he's not our Pope. We don't obey him. We have been resisting him. What do you accept?
Yes, I think that's a strong argument. That modernists are saying in the piazza of St. Peter's, "Viva il Papa," doesn't do anything for him in that sense. But yes, there is a Novus Ordo Catholic. He might actually adhere to heresy, but he is still not excommunicated. He is materially Catholic, even if he's a heretic. He's materially Catholic in the sense that he has not been put out of the church juridically. If he's a guilty of heresy formally, that means he's outside of the church in fact, but he's not outside of the church juridically. Just as a murderer is a murderer in fact, but before he's tried, he's as innocent as a lamb. See, before he's convicted in a courtroom juridically, he's as innocent as a lamb. So that you have to distinguish the fact of heresy and the crime of heresy. So in that sense, the the Novus Ordo Catholics would still have, in that sense, a voice in saying, in establishing UPA.
So one argument that has often been used is that I know you talk about the religion of Vatican II being different, but there's also the term, synodal church, which is becoming more popular these days, especially because Leo himself basically says, I'm a co-founder of the synodal church, but also the term conciliar church, which emanates from the time of Archbishop Lefebvre. I know you don't make much of those terms, but there has been an argument made that, well, this synodal church, this conciliar church, is a sect within the Catholic Church and that they overlap together. Have you heard of that theory? And do you have any insights as to what your theories on that?
Theory? It's impossible that you could have a sect within the Catholic Church. First of all, sect means something cut off. It comes from a Latin word which means cut off. So the very term sect within the Catholic Church is impossible in its very definition, because if it's a sect, it's outside the Catholic Church. What the reality is that within the walls of, if you might say, of the Catholic Church, the juridical entity of the Catholic Church, you have people who are heretics, and they have been elected popes, and they have been appointed bishops, etc., and they are promulgating a false religion within the juridical structures of the Catholic Church. And that's the problem. If they had become a sect, like Luther or the Calvinists, and said, we want nothing to do with the Church of Rome, and made their own, first modernist church of whatever, people would say, well, that's, they broke off just like everybody else broke off. We don't have to pay attention to them. But they are using you might say, the authority or the prestige of St. Peter's Basilica, etc., to promulgate their heresy. That is the exact problem, and that's why they have had so much success, because they say, well, the Pope says this, the Bishop says this, we are told to do this, we go to Catholic schools, we learn all of this garbage. See, that's the problem. That's the very problem. But I mean, to say that there's a sect with the very term sect means it's cut off. There's a false religion in the walls of the church. I would say that.
Yes. So where then is the church itself? We know the church will be visible. Do you have a solution to that question? Because often asked, because, well, if you don't believe this is the church, well, where is it? And some will respond, well, it's in pockets of resistance. It's where the traditional faith is kept. Where, in Your Excellency's opinion, is the church itself?
Well, you still have the continuity of the institution of the church, the institution of the papacy, all of that continues to exist. And you also have the continuity of faith and sacraments and the Mass among priests who are, and bishops who are preserving those things. So in that sense, you have, yes, a small group of people. Cardinal Bio said in this time you would see a very small group resisting. So you have all the elements of the continuity of the Catholic Church, both in its life and in its structure.
So where is, I guess, maybe is in Sedevacanist communities and other traditional communities, is that really where the church is, given that it has and it follows the traditional faith itself? Is that where the church per se is being kept alive, maybe?
The church is being kept alive in those cases. Yes, I mean, I don't like to say we are the church or anything like that. That would be wrong. But the sacramental, doctrinal, liturgical aspects of the church are being kept alive in these small groups, and at the same time, you have the continuity of the institution of the church in the hands of, unfortunately, the modernists. In other words, they are preserving that. They're very careful to elect popes, etc., and to appoint people. I always say, think of the Empire State Building full of rats and vermin. In other words, you have a structure there, but inside it's all rats and vermin. See, but the structure is still there, and they keep it up. You see, they wash the windows and they do everything that's necessary to keep that building looking nice. You see, so that's you might say, the ecclesiology of the present time.
Something that's coming to mind here is, well, it reminds me, like when we're alive, we have our bones, our flesh, our skin. But when we die, the flesh passes away, and when eventually we just deteriorate to bone. So what it sounds like you're saying is you're sort of separating the faith from the church itself in the same manner that after we die, the only thing that's left is the skeleton and the body is decayed. Is that, am I understanding you right? And it seems to me is that even possible to separate? Because what you're saying is basically, well, the church is where the skeleton is, when it seems to me that the church needs to be where a living person might be.
Well, we are a living person. I'm 75, but I'm still alive. At least for today. There are in the church you have a juridical aspect. There's that would be a material aspect, you might say, of the church that is continuing. There has been no shutdown of that. You see, and at the same time there is, you might say, a spiritual aspect, the faith, the sacraments, everything that pertains to eternal salvation. That is continuing in the church. Sedevacantists are subject to the authority of the Pope. The Pope is absent right now, but we are subject to the authority of the Pope. See, if a Pope is elected, a true Pope is elected, we submit to him. Mm-hmm. See, so there is no, all the ingredients are there. You see, you have both the structure and the faith and the sacraments and all of the, you might say, spiritual side of the church. That's all there. Mm-hmm. It's just that there is objectively an enormous apostasy of people, objectively, because I don't judge their consciences, but objectively they are adhering to and professing a false religion, even though they're claiming the name Catholic.
The issue of ordinary jurisdiction is something that I think probably pertains to this, because I believe yourself and others would say, well, we operate under supplied jurisdiction because it's an emergency situation. Can you delve more into that aspect? And do you believe any bishops in the world, in the church today, have ordinary jurisdiction? What does that actually mean for apostolic succession?
Well, ordinary jurisdiction is that jurisdiction which is given, which ultimately comes from Christ and is mediated by the Pope. That's Pope Pius XII. That means he hands it to you. Mm-hmm. It's given to bishops. Bishops give it to pastors of churches. That's the hierarchical chain. And to heads of religious orders, etc. And then priests operate according to this authority given to them by the local pastor or the bishop of the diocese, as the case may be. That is the chain of ordinary jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. All right. So, and in ordinary times that functions very nicely. But because of the breakdown of the faith in those who should have this ordinary jurisdiction, yes, all we're saying is that we have the sacramental jurisdiction to preserve the sacramental life of the church. So we are permitted by that to say mass, hear confessions, and do other things that pertain to the maintenance of the spiritual life of the church. Mm-hmm. We don't have any jurisdiction to rule. Mm-hmm. See, that means to make laws or anything like that. So you have to distinguish between the jurisdiction to rule and the jurisdiction to sanctify, because even to preach, you need the permission of the local bishop. Mm-hmm. Just to give a sermon, for a deacon to give a sermon, you need the permission of the local bishop. You can't do anything in the Catholic Church without the permission of the local bishop. If you can't publish theological tracts or anything, he's the boss of the whole diocese. Say so.
So then, if there is or isn't any ordinary jurisdiction, I mean, if we don't have a Catholic occupying the seat, if the Pope is out, checked out, basically, he is not dispensing or approving of ordinary jurisdiction. Does that have major implications for apostolic succession? And what does that mean for like the church itself if there isn't any of that going on?
No. That's one of the reasons for the thesis, is that it protects apostolic succession, and that is that there is a true succession based on the chain that goes back to St. Peter, the Petrine lineage of popes and people who elect them. They in turn appoint electors who are cardinals, and he also appoints bishops, etc. And they are materially a hierarchy. That is, they have a legitimate appointment and legitimate election. And that guarantees the continuity, the Petrine lineage, and the continuity of the ability to receive jurisdiction to rule. See, that they could receive it. They are in a position to receive it, just like a president-elect is in a position to become the president, but he's not the president until January. He has no power whatsoever. But he does appoint people in that time, in November, December, who come to power when he comes to power.
Let me throw something at you. I'm not sure, Your Excellency, maybe have ever been asked this. If, let's say, Leo tomorrow sends an envoy to the Roman Catholic Institute and says, Bishop Sanborn, we want to grant you some sort of prelature or some sort of situation where you will have some jurisdiction in our church, in this church. Would you accept that? And then would that mean, you're like the only bishop in the church that has ordinary jurisdiction? Can you maybe go along with my hypothesis here that if something like that would happen, what would you respond with or do?
I would tell them, you can't give what you haven't got.
Okay.
You don't have jurisdiction to give me. You have to return to the faith before you could presume to have jurisdiction. And the best thing you could do is resign. But no, and of course I would not accept that. I mean, you can't give what you haven't got.
Yes. So let's talk about Leo then, if you don't mind, Your Excellency. We're going on an hour, and thank you for being here. Again, thank everybody for tuning in today to this special episode. It's a great privilege to be with His Excellency Bishop Sanborn. Again, if you're asking questions in the comments, we can't get to them right now. This is not a live show, but thank you for your efforts. And if you really appreciate what you're watching today, be sure to send a super thanks. That really helps with the program. In regards to Leo, I know you've done a lot of Leo Watch programs, and I think you've probably burned out from them because you've been so busy on them because it's a nonstop clown show, really.
We can't keep up.
Yeah, it's too much, for myself included. I think I'm sort of trying to check out because it's just a lot. But it seems to me the trad influencers, who I call Trad Inc., their strategy is different than what they call the strategy under Leo, or I'm sorry, Francis. It's to basically zip it, to keep quiet on the heresies that are coming out in potential exchange for more Latin masses across the world. I'm not sure if you've stayed up to date on any of that sort of stuff, but is that what trads should be doing in this time?
No, there's many considerations with regard to the Latin Mass. We're talking about the traditional Latin Mass, I think, and that is a complete anomaly in the context of the Novus Ordo. You're asking for some sort of antique, you might say, to exist in a museum of modern art. It just doesn't fit. All of the theology that exudes from the traditional Latin Mass is contrary to the Vatican II theology and all of the defection from the faith. So it's no, and that is not going to solve the problem in the church. And also, it is contrary to everything I said. Why do we need resistance? If the new Mass is from the authority of the Pope, that means it's from the authority of Christ. Why don't we just accept it? See, if we have to resist the liturgy of the Catholic Church, so much so that we won't even go to it, and we have to have the traditional Latin Mass, that says that there is defection from the faith. That the church has prescribed something that is impious. That's against the Council of Trent. The Council of Trent says if you say that the rites of the Catholic Church are an inspiration to impiety, anathema sit. You are a heretic. So if you're saying the new Mass is an inspiration to impiety or in some way intrinsically unacceptable, you're a heretic, according to the Council of Trent.
Well, I've always borrowed your phrase for my podcast, the side chapel in the conciliar cathedral. I love it. I think it's great. And stunningly, Michael Matt of the Remnant actually wrote a tweet and said, "We want to be a side chapel." I said, "Oh my gosh, like what is going on here?" So they want coexistence. That's the real scandal in my view, Your Excellency, is they're putting the faith, or at least the Mass, which is supposed to represent the faith, and they're emptying out of its doctrinal content and just putting it, as you said there, sort of on parade I think previously you've used the term, it's like a costume, right? It's like a Halloween costume. It's not cloaked with the truth.
It is the traditional rites, the vestments, all of the magnificence that you see, and those organizations that have it do the traditional mass absolutely beautifully. I see some of their videos. All of that is clothing of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
If it is not the clothing of the truth, it is a sham.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the characters in the Metropolitan Opera. In other words, they're all dressed up and everything, but it's just a story. Mm-hmm. See, there's no connection to the truth. Mm-hmm. And it's even worse in the case of Catholicism, because the truth demands that it be exemplified and preached by the liturgy of the Mass. So it's even worse. It's not a great analogy, but it's unfortunately true. Mm-hmm. And it's the ostrich approach.
Yeah. What's that, Your Excellency?
Well, put your head in the sand, and we won't worry about the destruction of the faith around us. We just have our Latin Mass, and we're happy. No, Catholics have to do more than that.
Do you think, Your Excellency, Pope Leo will be more dangerous for traditionalists? Some have called them semi-trads, the indult communities, etc., than Francis was, because obviously, Bergoglio was attacking in a vehement manner everybody, left, right, and center, accusing everybody who was saying the old Mass wearing lace vestments, grandma's vestments. It seems Leo is a much more smoother operator. He's a little bit different, wears the trappings fairly well of the office. But where do you see things going under him with the traditional movement?
I think he's very much more dangerous than Francis for many reasons. He is smooth and nice, but I think he has an agenda that is much more organized and intent, you might say, than Francis. Francis would talk off the top of his head and say comments, but he is very careful about what he says. But you can see that he is pushing this synodal, an accent on the first syllable there, by the synodal church, as he calls it, which is really the total destruction of Catholicism. And in the few months that he has been so-called Pope, we have seen a tremendous dismantling of Catholic dogma. The one thing was the filioque that was dumped. And then the Mediatrix of All Graces was dumped. And he is intent upon getting the Orthodox in, the so-called Orthodox, the schismatics. He's intent on getting the Protestants in. He has an agenda. He also is very uncomfortably a pusher of all of the globalist agenda, the climate change. He was just talking about it again today, I think, and the immigration, all of these things that are sort of preparations for Antichrist, in my opinion. The globalization of the whole world, one world government. He talked about how climate change will bring about economic structures in the future that will be fair. You know what that means. That's world socialism. I suspect him of being a type of agent of that whole group. I suspect that. I don't have proof, but I suspect it.
Yeah, I know Father David Nix said to me in an interview not actually long ago, a couple months ago, he said he believed that Prevost was chosen over 2 years ago by the global elites. And I have anecdotal proof that might have happened, because I'm speaking with a priest down in Peru who knows there was an abuse situation there, and Prevost did not follow, when he was Bishop of Chiclayo, actual canon law about what to do about allegations that were brought forward. And when this priest started speaking up, his name is Monsignor Coronado Orozque, he was eventually blocked around 2023, and his suspicion was that at that point, he was eventually dismissed from the priesthood. His suspicion was that he was being attacked because Prevost was being, elevated to certain positions, and the timing seems to make a lot of sense there. But
well, the immediacy of his election says a lot. That means to me, he was anointed before he went in. That especially in the context of all of the turmoil in the Catholic Church, that I thought it was going to last for 2 or 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day he's elected, and he's an American.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they never elect Americans. And so I just he's obsessed. The ice cube, the sacred ice cube, all of this. The parade of all of the pagan religions. I mean, he has an agenda.
Yes.
And he is not giving up. I mean, every single day there's something that is more shocking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I call it Glacier Gate is what that situation was. And but you're right, absolutely. I mean, he's made two cornerstones of his reign: immigration and climate change. That's the two things you have to support. He's pushing that very, very hard, and that's why the USCCB is coming out with this big initiative and pushing back against Trump. And his deportations are not even like off the charts astronomical. They're barely above like Biden and Obama era deportations, but they're making this a big issue because I think they want to stunt him for the midterms.
Yes, I have no doubt. Yes, and he was democratically elected by a landslide, and he said he would do this. Trump said he would do this.
Yeah.
He's doing it. Do these people not believe in democracy? Maybe. This is the will of the people. He said he would do this. He's not doing anything he said, against what he said.
Going back to Leo for just a moment, I know Your Excellency has often said, we need to burn the Vatican II documents in St. Peter's Square. Now, if that happens, let's say it happens tomorrow, there still needs to be some sort of practical shift, maybe, into the next phase of recovering the situation, right? And what I mean is, we can burn the documents, we can eradicate all these things, but practically speaking, there might need to be some, I don't know, use the term pastoral nature to some of these changes. Do you maybe have you ever thought of maybe 3 or 4 bullet points like that you would do or advise the Vatican to do to get the church back in the situation it was before? I mean, I've thought about this before. My mind goes to, well, suppressing the Jesuits, defrocking all the homosexuals. Are there any bullet points that you might have other than just burning the documents of the council?
Well, yeah. I mean, think of rebuilding Hiroshima after the bomb. Yes, burning the documents would be only the first step, but an absolutely essential step. Mm-hmm. You would have to annul all of the canonizations, annul all of the canonical acts, anything, annulment of all those acts, Mm-hmm. And then, yes, you would have immense pastoral problems with all the marriage annulments, for example, that were done without sufficient jurisdiction. I mean, yes, I think about how would you do this, Do
you think it's even possible? Is this something our Lord won't? Because it would be a Herculean saintly. You have to be divinely inspired to know how to try to figure it all out, it seems. What would you do at the Novus Ordo Mass? Would you give these clergy a 6-month time frame to be reconsecrated in the traditional rite? I don't know.
Not the first day. That would be after you burn the documents. You would suppress all of those things, everything that ever was enacted by Vatican II, and thereafter just suppress it. It would take as a signature, even a statement.
Do you think there might be some perhaps consequences such as that week? Let's say you burn the documents on Friday, Saturday you ban the new Novus Ordo Mass, then Sunday all the churches no liturgies, or I guess
Yes, it would be a very shocking situation, because you would have to find out who are the validly consecrated bishops and who are the validly ordained priests. That's another major, major problem, because they have invalidated the consecration of bishops by incorporating in the form the heresy of Vatican II that the bishops, by their consecration, have jurisdiction over the church. The church has always separated the sacramental aspect of episcopacy from the juridical aspect of episcopacy. That's why you had auxiliary bishops who didn't have a speck of jurisdiction. The vicar general had more to say than they did. And you actually became the bishop of the diocese before your consecration. Even as a priest, when you were named, you already had the jurisdiction. Then your consecration might happen a month later. Mm-hmm. See, so they were always separated, but because of collegiality, they wanted to put those two together. Whenever there is an error in a sacramental form, it's invalid.
Mm.
Some sort of doctrinal error.
So it sounds like Your Excellency is calling for a great reset. Is that what you're basically asking
A
for?
great reset in the Catholic Church. I would be happy to do it if anybody lets me. But yeah.
So
But
the offer is on the table for Pope Pius XIII to come in and do all these things. So it'd be a glorious day.
Yes, it would just everyone would be very busy.
Mhm. Well, I only have a couple more questions for you, Your Excellency. I know we're over an hour, so thank you for your time. It's very generous, and I know our viewers are enjoying the show as well. Again, thank you, everybody, for sticking along with us for this long. I want to ask a couple more questions about maybe the situation going forward, as well as some maybe theological questions as well. One theory that I've heard put forth by some friends of mine who have written about this is that really the birth rate of traditionalists and those who at least enjoy the Latin Mass, who like it and who go to it, maybe not at the ascetic communities or, but maybe even in indult communities, the birth rates alone over the next 30 years and the number of seminarians who are going to more traditionally inclined seminaries are really going to overtake the modernists, just statistically speaking alone. Do you pin much hopes on that? It seems people are just saying, well, in 30 years, it'll all be over because of the numbers. But it seems to me that's sort of that's not really should be our strategy.
No, I don't think that's, no, I don't think the numbers are there. And and it's not our strategy either. Our strategy is to repudiate the false religion, no matter what the numbers are. And, God is never interested in quantity. He is infinite, and he can make as much quantity as he wants and wills. I mean, so and historically, God has always used small numbers to overcome great enemies. Think of Gideon, where he only had 300 out of 30,000 who showed up. 300, and because of the instructions that God gave them, he overcame the Amorites. There's many occasions of that, because God wants to show his power and not the power of human beings. So really numbers don't matter. It's the faith, and it's our perseverance, and so I don't think that's.
Well, that was my next question, actually, because a lot of well, some people will say that there's so few Sedevacantists in the world. There's so few who even go to the Latin Mass. It seems like it's a sort of topic really confined to the Midwest, in the United States in the 21st century, which does seem to have some credence to that. But I know you've seen growth all over the world with your own ministry and efforts. So you can probably say, no, it is growing. But why are there so few Sedevacantists? And what is the strategy, if there is even such a strategy, going forward? Isn't it just to kind of keep the faith and say, well, God's going to resolve all of this at some point, right?
Well, first of all, I think that the reason for the paucity of numbers in the Sedevacantist camp is Archbishop Lefebvre. I think, he certainly deserves the credit for putting the traditional movement on its feet. But at the same time, he was very ambivalent back and forth about how to treat the modernists in Rome. And sometimes he was very hardline, sometimes very softline. But he established this idea of recognize and resist. And also he established, you might say, the brand. In other words, that he was the great man who established the resistance to Vatican II, and we should follow him. See, so there's an attraction, and they see some significant numbers. I think that's the problem, is that the traditional movement was derailed in that way. And that it is operating, for the most part, on a false principle. People perceive saying that the Pope is not the Pope as something radical and almost impossible. It'd be like saying the president is not the president. But I think when they start thinking about it, it makes sense, especially given all of what I said about the infallibility and indefectibility of the Church, and also the fact that resistance is a form of schism, that it doesn't help you to raise a flag of schism against the person that you say is the Pope, and just to give him a picture on the wall as you come in the church, as SSPX does. and mentioning him in the canon, when in fact he doesn't approve of that mass, which makes it objectively a schismatic mass because he doesn't approve of the use of the mass by that priest. See, so that doesn't help. I mean, it's not a solution, but it's perceived as a solution. People like to think, well, we're with the Pope, but we're resisting. That is attractive to people.
And did Your Excellency find that under Leo, or maybe even under Francis more so, that there were more Catholics coming to either your position or what's commonly called the totalist position? Is this a growing perspective that more Catholics are coming to? And if it is, what is the duty of Sedevacantists, especially laypersons, towards newcomers to the space, if you will? There might be some skepticism of those who are coming, and maybe they're not fully on board yet. How do you see those dynamics playing out? And what is your pastoral advice to not just lay people, but especially clergy too, who are speaking to new people who might not know all the details, but who think this is probably right?
Yes, it is growing. I mean, it's not a tsunami, all right, but it's growing. It's growing slowly. We do have to. Concerning Francis and now Leo, I always said about Francis, I hope he lives forever, because he drove the Sedevacantist movement a great deal. See, Benedict with the red shoes and the furry thing and the hat and everything and all that stuff, people were deceived by him. He's a radical modernist. And I used to call him Goody Two Shoes because he had those red shoes and people got attached to those things. When Leo came out on the balcony, he had the little half cape on, and commentators are saying, look, he's so conservative, he's got the half cape on. I mean, this is really bad that they would attach themselves to such superficial things, But anyway, Ratzinger was the worst thing that happened to us. See, because he gave an impression, permitting the traditional mass and so forth, gave an impression of conservatism. Well, we can, live with this. We can, it's sort of a blend of the two religions, But Francis was wonderful with regard to making clear the break between Vatican II and the traditional faith. So, and I think this one will be the same. I think he will drive it the same way. And when they come back to us, we notice that Novus Ordo people know virtually nothing about the faith to a greater or lesser extent, I would say. But we have to catechize them, and we spend an awful lot of time doing that. We have actually videos of catechism because they have to be instructed in the faith. They don't really know anything. Bishop Barron said 70% don't believe that the Holy Eucharist is the body and blood of Christ. That's his figure. And then birth control, I mean, you see 83%, over 90% think that artificial birth control is completely all right. One priest that came to us from the Novus Ordo said you can't even mention it to the people in the pulpit. And another priest who came to us from the Novus Ordo said, I spoke about it once and I was heckled by the people in the pews. You see, this is the condition of the Novus Ordo. So, yes. Now, those who come in, are more conservative than that. You might say. I mean, they're obviously in the percentage that is on the right side. You might say. But we don't take anything for granted, and we have to. We vet all of their baptisms because the Novus Ordo priests commonly do baptisms invalidly, especially in the case of adults. They baptize only the hair. And if you look at all of the traditional books, baptism on the hair only is dubious. So that's a great deal of our work is to baptize them correctly. And then, we have not only do they have to do that, if they're baptized conditionally, which we do, then they have to make a confession of their whole lives. So a general confession. So we have a lot of work in drawing back the Novus Ordites.
You mentioned Ratzinger there. I've spoken to several people on this podcast who would identify themselves as not Benevacantists per se. That's a term that's sort of gone out of use now. But now we'll call themselves interregnimists. In other words, that Benedict resigned invalidly, as well as the fact that Francis was such an out and out heretic. I have always made the case in response to them that, well, if Francis is a heretic. They're all subscribing to the same heresies. What's holding you back from saying they're all supposed to be canceled here? We're supposed to annul everything since the council. So what do you make of, well, first of all, Benedict's resignation itself, which seemed to be done under either duress or to expand his understanding of the papacy, and then those who still just say, well, I'm an interregnumist since Benedict's time, and that's it. Just Francis and Leo are doubtful.
I don't think there's any reason to question his resignation. He even asserted it again afterwards because there was some talk of that, and he made a very clear assertion that he did resign. I really don't think there's evidence for it. He acted that way. Again, GP, Universal, UPA, I was going to say GPS, Universal Pacific Acceptance. In other words, that was accepted universally. He in that sense, lost his election, and the new election was accepted universally. So I don't think you have a serious argument there, in my opinion.
I think the argument is that, well, afterwards, Bishop Ganswein, his secretary, came forward and said that Ratzinger intended to expand the Petrine ministry, one with an active arm and one with a more contemplative arm.
Oh,
but then he later walked that back too. So he has sent mixed messages as well. So
again, that doesn't make or break an election or a resignation. I mean, that's I don't think it's serious.
Okay.
If he screamed, "I was pushed and threatened," and yes, that would render the whole thing doubtful, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're actually just a few more questions again. Thank you for being here. You don't, I notice, speak much about, I'll just say generally, prophecies, Our Lady of Fatima, Our Lady of La Salette, etc. Is there any, and perhaps you have, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is there a reason for that? And if you had to be pressed on maybe a sort of prophetic question, I know the Book of the Apocalypse calls the church in the end times, the anti-church, the whore of Babylon. Is that what we're living through right now?
Well, the Apocalypse is extremely difficult to interpret, and there are as many interpretations as there are interpretations. In other words, there are as many as theologians interpret, and St. Jerome said every word is a mystery. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you can put a lot of, how would you say, faith, you might say, into an application of the Apocalypse to what we're living through now. Mm. Some say it pertains only to the period of the Church in the Roman Empire. Mm. Many theologians said that. So I would set that aside. As far as La Salette, the popular comment from the messages of La Salette that Rome would become the seat of the Antichrist, would lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist, was in the second message or revelation of messages that was condemned by Pius XI, all right, in the 1920s. So we cannot give that any credence. That was actually condemned. It's in the Acta Apostolicae Sedis. All right, so I don't think La Salette counts either. But we don't know everything that La Salette said because it was communicated to Pius IX, and he had a comment that it was like very, very serious. That's all he said. I can't remember the exact words, but again, prophecy is something that may or may not be true, and it doesn't have we don't give the assent of faith to those things. It's just, well, it may be true, it may not be true. And Fatima really didn't speak about anything that's going on today. At least we don't know that it spoke about anything. In other words, that third secret, I suspect, had something to do with what is going on today. But we really never got the whole story on that, if we got any of it, really.
Right. Where then do you see going forward? I know you've been asked this many times. How would we ever get a new pope? It's been theorized by some that, the people and priests of Rome would rise up. The College of Cardinals has lower T tradition, it seems, taken on what is the method that the Holy Spirit wants to elect a pope. But in the years past, like centuries past, there's been other methods. What might be a potential future in those methods?
Well, Gregory the Seventh was the one that established the College of Cardinals and made that the way in which to elect a pope. That was in the 11th century. It was in reaction to the more popular method of the Roman clergy electing and the concursus of the people, which was not really essential to it, but typically happened. But the emperors started getting involved in who would be pope and who would not be pope. And so he established the College of Cardinals, and they are the ones that elect the pope, period. So it has to come from that College of Cardinals. Now, you could see, as things go along, some of the more courageous cardinals saying this is enough and breaking away from the modernist cardinals and electing a pope. I would say that would be very probably a valid election if they elect somebody who is truly faithful to the Catholic Church. So, but it has to come from cardinals.
Okay, so so this has been another question. Sedevacantists would not elect their own because, well, that's the conclave's position. No one's going to listen to that person, whoever it might be.
No, that's absurd.
Why so, Your Excellency?
Well, we have no power. It'd be like if I went out and ran for president on the street and said, I'm the president of the United States because the neighbors voted for me. I mean, that's just absurd. That's laughable.
Is the theological argument, though, that supplied jurisdiction cannot confect ordinary jurisdiction?
Supplied jurisdiction. The supplied jurisdiction has to have some title. In other words, you can't say.
Well, I guess my point is, I guess, that you earlier said you were doing what you're doing under, maybe I think you used the term sacramental jurisdiction. The SSPX has used the term supplied jurisdiction. And so in other words, you have no official power from the church. So in other words, the theological argument might be, well, we can't produce a pope on our own. Is that what basically you're saying? Yes,
because you're dealing in the electing a pope, you're dealing in jurisdiction to rule. In sacraments, it's jurisdiction to administer sacraments. And the needs of the faithful demand that some priests who are faithful give them sacraments. That's perfectly normal. But the jurisdiction to rule is a whole other thing. You can't assume any more than you could assume, as I said, to be the president of the United States. That has to come through legal channels.
And so, in theory, it would be potentially Cardinal Burke or Cardinal Muller. Those are the most conservative cardinals. They would have to do it. Someone in the cardinals would have to do this.
Well, I'm suggesting that. In other words, that you could see, and they declare the see to be vacant because of everything that we said in this video, and that we are the faithful cardinals, you might say, and they elect the pope, and I could see that. I'm not a prophet, or I'm not, declaring that's the way it's going to happen, but I would see that as probable anyway, and probable outcome.
And that seems to me the crux of the matter with especially the opinions of St. Robert Bellarmine is that in a normal time when we would have cardinals who are not modernists, who are not complicit with this conciliar coup, this modernist coup at the council, they would obviously recognize the situation and either depose or take some sort of action, electing another pope instead of John Paul, Ratzinger, etc. But the entire conciliar hierarchy has gone along with it. And so there's no one who theorized about what we're really living through right now.
Yes, no one theorized it. Even they always talked about the remote possibility of a heretical pope and someone who was committing the sin of heresy, and publicly so. But all of them say, yes, some say he would not fall from the papacy until he was declared by the College of Cardinals, and that would be John of St. Thomas and Cajetan, whereas Bellarmine and his school said, yes, he would fall automatically from power by public heresy, but he must be deposed. In other words, that he would still retain the papacy, at least materially, until he was deposed. So it doesn't get you anywhere. In other words, notice what St. Paul said. If somebody is a heretic, let him be denounced to the church. You see, that's in one case, he says that. But on the other case, if I or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel different from what I have preached to you, let him be anathema. So the point is here that we are being preached to by heretics, and the heresy is being preached to us. That means that we say anathema. But it doesn't do anything in the juridical order. It just means that these people, in fact, do not have the authority of Christ to rule the church, even though they be elected.
Last question I have for Your Excellency. Again, thank you for being here. It's been a great privilege. I hope you'll come back and we can talk more about the theology of all the issues of the papacy and all the different opinions, but as well as any other topic that you might be interested in. This is more of a question for the laity, because well, you were part of the SSPX for a certain amount of time, but now you have your own organization, and it seems to me that well, the SSPX, what they will do is they will set up a headquarters in a given state or area, and then send out their clergy on weekends to do mission chapels. Some folks who I have been speaking to for years, and I've been in tradition for over 15 years now, is that, well, this really gives very little time for the priests to be with you and to build the community there during weekly, daily mass, etc. And they're treated more like sacramental dispensaries. And so what is your wisdom, and what have you done with the Roman Catholic Institute in terms of your missionary activity, if I can call it that? Is it to go somewhere to build it up and really start that community, or is it to just get the sacraments and keep people in the state of grace wherever and however you can? Or what is your approach on that issue?
Well, it depends. There is you need some home bases, and then people ask, can we get the mass? And for example, they may not be able to support a priest in their area. See, they might have 10 people, might have 20 people, and they may not be able to even afford their airfare practically, or their transportation. So there's some practical considerations there that you have to deal with. I mean, just to defend what the SSPX is doing is that that places grow or don't grow. In other words, something like sowing seed. Sometimes some of it takes, some of it doesn't. And so you work on those areas that grow, and as they could support a priest, you would eventually make them into a home base for a certain area. See, so that's the way it naturally grows. But as much as possible, like for example, we have a church about 30 miles from here, and we give them a lot of attention. We have catechism once a week. The priest goes downstairs after mass and talks to the people on Sundays and all. There's a lot of interaction with the lay people. But I could see where in remote missions where there's a few people, it's really all you can do. But we are sensitive if people say we want some instruction or something like that. We do give that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you here at Kokx News. This is the Roman Catholic Media YouTube channel. If everyone is still watching, you can definitely go to this and look at His Excellency's videos. Great interviews with Stephen Heiner, who's a real pro. I think you two work well together for what it's worth. Here's also the Most Holy Trinity Seminary YouTube channel as well, which is something that I've been watching more. You post, Your Excellency, videos of seminary classes, I believe, on here as well, and that's very helpful for lay persons who are interested in learning more. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Your Excellency?
The Ecclesia this year, the tract on the church, that would be very interesting for lay people. It's not very complicated. There's not a lot of philosophy. If we did the tract on the Trinity, you would get lost, first day. Right, but there's no philosophy in it, and there's a lot of interesting things that pertain to the present situation, and I would recommend that to the lay people.
Well, again, it's been a great honor for me to speak with you today, Your Excellency. I hope a lot of people enjoyed this. Again, this is Your Excellency runs the Roman Catholic Institute. Here is the website. I will put it in the show notes. Some beautiful pictures here. This is Bishop Selway. How many priests do you have with the Institute, Your Excellency? And what can you tell us about what you've been up to?
It's not many. What is it? Maybe about 12 or 13. It's not many. We don't have that many. but we have this 3 bishops, and then I would have to count them. I know who they are, but I haven't ever counted them. We have 2 in Australia, we have 2 in France, we have 1 in England. The rest of us are here we have 1 in Poland, yes, and so they're all very busy. The Australian priests are going into Asia. They go to Vietnam, both Hanoi and Saigon, and they occasionally go to Japan. Our priest goes occasionally to Hawaii for a family. I mean, we are, Puerto Rico too. We get around. You're very familiar with the airlines.
Yeah.
I always say the 2 best friends of the traditional movement are the internet and the jet engine.
Well, thank God we were born in the times we were, then to take advantage of those things. And if you to come on this program with myself, it's been a great privilege.
Thank you for having me.